So, from a theological standpoint, does God even exist? If God exists, does he care? If God cares, does he have the power or the interest to intervene? So, why has God not intervened to divert the numerous extinction-level event catastrophes that have devastated Earth? Do we have any evidence of a divine plan? Let's look at what we can deduce about God. Let's focus on whether God and Jesus could be the same, because that is the key to understanding what Jesus really might be and what his original true message really was. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 15th episode of the Quintology Files. Today we're going to talk about theology, and we're going to draw upon some discussions in the second book of my series, God, Enki, Ramadok, and Yahweh. Please fasten your safety belts. This could be turbulent. This is a broad introductory discussion calling upon what the catastrophes that we've talked about tell us about our theology, our view of God. When we talk of God, what do we actually mean? I suggest it's the highest power, the intelligence that led to our universe. Personally, I prefer the title designer, as we discussed previously. Creation is something that we are increasingly able to do ourselves. But the design specification built into how subatomic particles interact and build atoms and compounds is truly way beyond our imagination. I think it's helpful to always start from first principles. So, from a theological standpoint, does God even exist? If God exists, does he care? If God cares, does he have the power or the interest to intervene? So, why has God not intervened to divert the numerous extinction-level event catastrophes that have devastated Earth? Let's look at what we can deduce about God. Yes, our universe and the properties of atoms and other fundamental forces clearly have been deliberately designed to an amazingly accurate specification. Do we have any evidence of a divine plan? Conventional theologians claim what I call the Omni powers for God. Omnipotence, the ability to do anything. Omniscient, knows everything. Omnipresent, to be present everywhere simultaneously throughout all time. That's quite a heavy power. And Omnibenevolent, God can only do good. But these, I think, are human claims to give us comfort that an amazing power created us and protects us. Personally, I think this pure conjecture on our part. There is simply no evidence to support any of these claims. In fact, if there is a deity with these powers, then our previous experience, a perilous experience, reveals such a deity to be rather cold and callous. Looking at the evidence around us, apart from unimaginable intellect, I think we can discern three main characteristics of God. The simple but infinitely clever structure that matter assumes of forming stars with planets and moons that enables the emergence of life forms. We've talked about that before. There's a magic to the way in which the first element created in untold volume, hydrogen, assembled itself into an order that produced the life-giving energy source of stars, the terraformable idea of planets, stirred and protected by the effects of moons orbiting them. Life can present in many forms. Last month, a team of Chinese scientists reporting on finding weird worms, mollusks and plant life at a depth of 9.5 kilometers in a deep ocean trench. The biology of these life forms apparently is based on the use of methane and hydrogen sulfide seeping from seabed vents. Amazing. Whilst it's been found that deep sea metallic nodules, the type now being seen as a great source of rare earth metals, with growing interest in mining the seabed, are actually a major source of oxygen, as these deposits can break down seawater into its component hydrogen and oxygen. So we need to be careful if we mine too much of it. The second characteristic I would suggest is unquantifiable bounty. Nature, God's design, produces everything in huge overabundance. From the number of stars, if you remember, it's like 10 to the power 22, it's beyond anyone's idea of a number they can conceive of, through to the number of eggs spawned by a salmon. Everything is produced in huge abundance. The third characteristic, I submit, is symmetry. Nature displays in symmetrical patterns. Only very low odd numbers are ever revealed. 1, 3, 5. The vast majority of life forms display characteristics in even numbers. At great enough magnification, everything is symmetrical. We've got fractals. The more symmetrical a human face, the greater degree of beauty we ascribe to it. We find symmetry, beauty, attractive. Is that because we see it as perfection? Our DNA is programmed to elevate and pursue symmetry. It's fascinating. Looking at the hard evidence, I believe our observations about how the universe works show it was designed by something with incredible intellect and obvious power. But at the same time, there is no evidence at all that this designer is still with us. Looking at what has happened to our planet, the designer may be busy elsewhere. Maybe is simply unimpressed at what has happened to this planet, the millions of species that have evolved here, including humans. Or maybe the designer has moved on and is designing an even better universe. We also have to consider that the designer no longer exists. I mean, our universe is 13.82 something billion years old. That's a long time. I just thought, wow, that sounds pretty heretical. Before I get arrested, I think we'd better press on. There's something to think about. I submit that the biggest error in Christian theology is the conflation of Jesus with God. The tortuous evolution of Christian beliefs in the early centuries reveal the twists and turns that led to the objectively bizarre confection described as the Trinity, whereby God is held to present itself, in three forms: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The story behind the development of this confection and what it means is truly worthy of an episode on its own, maybe 2 or 3. Today, let's focus on whether God and Jesus could be the same, because that is the key to understanding what Jesus really might be and what his original true message really was. As we ascribe creation and seniority to a power we name God, let's reserve that entity the role I describe as designer. While alive on earth, Jesus never described himself as God. No one believed he was God. The Gospels do not record him as God. there are a few deliberately misunderstood or mistranslated verses. And yes, you always say, what about John 1:1? Yeah, famously, it's claimed to say that according to John, no, this is not a quote from Jesus, Jesus is the Logos, and Jesus is God. But that's a simple mistranslation from the Greek. In Greek, it does say Jesus is the Logos. What is the Logos? The Logos was a central part of ancient Greek culture, that above the panoply of gods that they believe existed was a supreme creator who, in his intellect and supremacy, would not deign to communicate directly with humanity, but he created and appointed another entity, the Logos, to speak to humanity. The central city in which this belief was expounded and explored was Ephesus. Where did John write the Gospel of John? Ephesus. Now, the Greek concept of the Logos is an amazing power, but it's clearly distinct, separate, and junior to God, the ultimate God. Then, John 1:1 goes on to say, in Greek, Jesus is a God. It does not say Jesus is God. It does not say Jesus is the God. It says Jesus is a God. A better translation would be Jesus is God's messenger to humanity and is himself divine. Now that, given the cultural context and humanity's knowledge at the time, I think was a very good assessment. John has been quoted out of context for a long time. The elevation of Jesus into God came primarily from three factors. And forgive me, I'm summarising, and so I'll be a little bit blunt. From Roman ignorance of Jewish beliefs and the meaning of Messiah. From opportunistic power grabs by Roman emperors and by self-serving, blended beliefs of Egyptian clerics. Wow. Did I say that? Wow, I think Opus Dei are out there. Sorry. Can you let us finish, please, first? For thousands of years before Jesus, any self-respecting leader claimed to be the Son of God. This generated respect. It showed that the leader deserved his role. It showed he had powerful support from above. He was divinely appointed, and therefore he should be obeyed. Usually, the ruler had special access to God. He was usually the high priest. More than that, specifically described as the oracle priest. That's the priest God spoke with. This practice continued with Roman emperors, other than short periods when Rome was a republic. Roman emperors also used the title Pontifex Maximus, the highest priest, usually personally chaired, for example, church councils, until they got bored with the endless debate, but they ensured they controlled the voting. If the voting was wrong, they had to re-vote. This is still reflected today when people refer to the Pope simply as the Bishop of Rome. That's the title that the Roman emperors used, because they were the high priest. The person in control of the Vatican was the Bishop of Rome. Seeing the growth of Christianity and its adherents' passion for a God outside of his line of control, Emperor Constantine concluded he would simply take it over and assume control. Constantine was already high priest of his religion, or the religion he followed, Sol Invictus, and decided to merge that belief with Christianity. At the Council of Nicaea, the merger agreement brought many aspects of Sol Invictus worship, tonsured priests, meatless Fridays, even the headquarters for the new religion, the new merged faith, was located at the main temple of Sol Invictus. Now, that is what we call the Vatican. Naturally, the role of Pontifex Maximus for the new merged religion went to Constantine, and it became part of the office of emperor, a sort of hereditary office. Indeed, Constantine saw himself as son of God, naturally, of the new merged religion. He saw himself as better than Jesus. He had a big empire. He had a victorious army. When he died and rose to heaven, he would displace Jesus because he had a better claim. When Constantine convened Nicaea, the Council of Nicaea in AD 325, to try and sort out the massive conflicting claims and beliefs within the new Christianity, it's estimated that between 80 and 90% of all the bishops that attended believed two slightly different principal beliefs, which to a layman are virtually identical, so I won't try and separate them out. But both of these groups, so between 80 and 90% of all the bishops, maintained that Jesus was not God and should not be worshipped as God. Now, this dominant majority position was clearly less appealing to Constantine, who favoured a minority Egyptian position that was supported by about 10% of the bishops, that Jesus was part of a trinity, not God, but one of three. This was based on the Egyptian theology of Osiris, Isis, and their son Horus. Isis was the most popular god, actually a goddess, across the entire Roman Empire during Jesus' time on earth. She had temples everywhere, right across the empire. She even had a temple in York, in northern England. The Egyptian beliefs around the Egyptian Trinity are deeply embedded in the Gospels, and thereby in Christian beliefs. You may be amazed to hear that Osiris, the god Osiris, was murdered and ascended to the heavens. His wife, Isis, who had never conceived, was impregnated by her deceased god husband, who visited her from heaven. But she remained a virgin. She was known as the Isis Mary. The transliteration of the term virgin from the Egyptian is Mary. The Isis Mary, amazingly similar to the Virgin Mary. Not only that, but their son was born on December the 25th. 25th of December is a vitally important date in ancient times. Everyone watched the heavens, everyone knew the constellations, everyone knew the seasons by looking at the sky. So, the winter solstice was a time of great fear. The sun had been tracking in one direction across the sky throughout the year. When we get to the winter solstice, which means the winter when the sun stands still, it didn't move. Everybody wanted to know, is it going to continue going away from us, or is it starting to come back and going to bring us a new summer next year? The first date on which the first perception of movement that could be ascertained was the sunrise of the 25th of December, the third day after the solstice. So that was a vitally important day. It was commemorated. Horus was born on December the 25th. And what happened soon afterwards? Horus was visited by the three kings. What are the Egyptian three kings then? It's the heliacal rising of the main stars of Orion's belt. The three main stars are known as the three kings. Having got his way, Constantine left the bishops to try and square a trinity with a central idea of monotheism, that there's only one God. The 4th century saw many more church councils, which moved to abolish the Trinity and then to restore it. And under Theodosius in 380 AD, under whom it was determined the Christian Trinity was not like the Egyptian family, but it was God the Father, God the Spirit, and Jesus. Now, if you know your New Testament, this will surprise you, as on a number of occasions, Jesus is quoted as stating, very simply, God is Spirit. So, what's God the Father then? I think even Jesus would be very baffled by the official church explanation of what the composition of the Trinity is.
Well, that's an heavy session. I think we're going to receive a few comments on this episode.
All comments welcome. I definitely feel Christian attempts to merge Jesus and God is not only wrong-headed, but actually a disservice to both. That may sound crazy. So over the next few episodes, we can start to examine the origin of Christian dogma and where the main beliefs originated. Thank you.